Yep.
Can you hear me now?
Good.
Good.
Yes.
There's Evan.
I can hear someone, the loop from.
That was me. Hey, Evan. How's it going?
Hi, everybody. How you guys doing?
Howdy,
Hi,
good.
Evan.
Hello, Meg. Good to see you again.
So,
Good
Evan,
to
that's
see you.
Alicia up there in the corner.
Down there in the left corner on my side. Hi, Alicia.
There you go.
Hello. So wait,
Evan
so now we
was
need to
the-
do like the Brady Bunch look?
Yeah, a little Brady Bunch look arounds. So,
Evan joined me to discuss Daisy Jones and the Six yesterday. That was the book I just gave you, John.
yeah, I know. I'm going to read that next. Actually, I'm reading like 7 books right now. So I have our next one here in front of me. So, quick introduction for everyone. Welcome, everyone, since we are live on YouTube. So, welcome, everyone. This is episode number 3,800 of our redoing this book club. So, as everyone will soon learn, we are doing a couple things. We're doing the Dresden series, which we are 1 book in. Our next book is Full Moon. Sorry, my bad. And we're reading that in a few weeks. And then the next book that we're reading is Once and Future, presented by James Patterson, which I didn't realize before, by Amy Rose Capetta and Corey McCarthy, which is a retelling of King Arthur
In space.
in space. It's the weirdest fucking thing you're going to read all year. So we can pass on this thing because we're not family friendly like we are in our Dungeons and Dragons game. So,
Yeah.
and so we are also doing Stephen King in chronological order, which we did Carrie last time, and now we are doing Salem's Lot. The next book, ooh, there it is in front of Meg. So the next book is Rage, I believe, is our next one for Stephen King, which came out in 1977. So let's spin around the room and everybody tell me what your, and we'll let Evan go first. So what were your initial thoughts of Salem's Lot?
So the only other King novel, oddly enough, that I've read was the one where he goes back in time to try to prevent the JFK
11/22.
63. Yep.
63. Yeah, I always get the date wrong. Which I enjoyed. I enjoyed the sci-fi aspect of it. I was never a huge horror fan. I mean, I watched Stephen King movies growing up, but obviously they are adaptations of the book where directors take much out of it, and King doesn't seem to be very happy about that. So
Not at all.
this is a first. So unfortunately, I missed Carrie. But I'm happy to start at the beginning of it all. Like it was Stephen King horror that I imagined. Very well written, draws me in. It's not like it. I don't think it doesn't stand the test of time. There's some things that are omitted that you might see from a modern horror novel, but you can also see how, especially at the time, how things kind of grew off of this sort of vampire theme, especially things like The Exorcist, right? I don't know if that was written or the movie was before or after.
Right around the same time.
Yeah, so you can kind of see that whole genre is sort of taking off on this. So yeah, no, I mean, as a first King read, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good place to start.
Awesome. How about you, Meg?
So I have read, this is my 3rd Stephen King book. I read Carrie, and then I read another one. And I have to say that I liked this one more than Carrie, definitely. I was a bigger fan of it. There were still parts that I didn't love. I don't know that it's the kind of book I would reread a bunch of times or be super into, but there were definitely characters that I really liked. There were aspects that I liked. It felt very much like a traditional vampire book, but keeping in mind that it was written in the 70s, it actually makes it a little bit less of a repetitive concept and more one of the originals. So that's nice. And I mean, I did a little bit of research and it seems he got the idea from Dracula. So it's there.
How about you, Alicia?
Well, it's my favorite Stephen King book so far.
So far. I thought you were going to say like of all time.
You're like 3 or 4 in at this point, so.
Well, we got 3 books into
Dark Tower.
4 books into Dark Tower.
3, I think we did.
Not looking forward to those again. Sorry.
They get better.
I'm excited for this because I think one of my favorite characters or story arcs in this book comes back in Dark Tower, I believe. from what I've heard through the grapevine. I've never read
Yeah,
it.
they run. So Marlowe, you will meet again in Needful Things. You'll find that I think this is what's going to be fun about reading King from the beginning, and in kind of like a shorter time period, is that you'll find that kind of all these, you'll see these characters consistently wind through time. So another thing is a lot of the Stephen King bad guy character are all the same person. So the Man in Black from the Dark Tower series is Randall Flagg, who is also in The Stand and a bunch of other books. So it all kind of weaves together nicely if you're reading them kind of as a bigger picture. What else did you think, Alicia?
I actually did enjoy this. So just for people who don't know, because I have a rambunctious 6-year-old who eats all my time, I listen to most of my books because I can do other things while reading it. And this was actually one book where I felt that it would have been better had I read it, because there were so many characters to keep track of, and there was no going back to be like, wait, no, who said that? So I had a hard time tracking some of the characters as they conversed. But other than that, like, to me, this one felt like a story. It felt like it told a good story, and I did enjoy it. So that's why I said so far it's my favorite Stephen King. It's the first one where I've been like, I understand why people like him. Okay.
So yeah, I like this book. It's weird. I guess since I started reading Stephen King when I was like 13, so I got in right around it, right? So I figured that was in the 80s, as I'm dating myself. So I started reading that at that time. So I didn't read a lot of the earlier ones, and I read Salem's Lot for the first time in like 2015 or 2016. And I really enjoyed it. It wound up being like a really good, and it's amazing to me the leap in his writing from Carrie to Salem's Lot, how much he progressed as a writer in that time period, because it's only like 3 years. And it's like he's leaps and bounds better at telling a story in Salem's Lot. And I think it was also something that was, as we talked about much in the Carrie book, it didn't come from a female perspective, which I'm sure you guys appreciated. And it was much more at home. And I don't know if anybody read, I always make it a kind of decision to read his introductions and his forewords, because he talks to his readers about why he did certain things. It was interesting to see I really enjoyed vampire books, and like, if anybody read the intro, it was basically like his publishing house at the time was like, why did you're going to be pigeonholed as a horror writer? And he was like, I don't give a shit as long as it cashes the checks. And it's funny because all this time later, he's kind of seen as a horror writer. And I feel like 80 to 90% of his books are not kind of horror books. There are some thrillers and some, but this is a traditional vampire horror book. So,
well, that's what you've said before too, that he's not really a horror writer. So I'm excited to get to those books and see what else.
Once we get to like Green Mile and like Shawshank and a lot of like Stand By Me and those books and those short stories, they're really, really good.
If they're anything like the movies, I will just be weeping the entire time.
Yeah. You tend to forget, everything that he's done just based off of the movies. I hear those movies and I don't initially associate them with Stephen King. And that's why I kind of enjoy that you guys are going through this, sort of step by step to get the whole sort of origin story behind the big Hollywood moneymaker.
Yeah. It's weird to me too, because his TV shows and the movies never really resonate with him, yet he still keeps selling them. I don't understand why he just keeps doing it. So The Stand's coming out again in December. At this point, he doesn't, let's be honest, he doesn't need the money. So yeah, but it is interesting. So who was everybody's favorite characters?
I'll go with Mark.
I was going to say Mark too.
Mark, the way, and you can see again, based off of what I've seen from it, by the movies, the old movies, TV shows, the way that he describes children and contrasts them with adults, you can start to see that with the way that he introduces Mark, and his sort of almost lack of fear. Whereas the fear that adults see is much more prevalent, and that contrast was really, really subtle to me, and I really enjoyed that aspect and look forward to that growing as I read more.
Yeah, I too really liked Mark. I had that written down as had him written down as my favorite character. Um, like I said, I think my favorite little story arc was the Father Callahan part of it. I thought that was an interesting kind of breakaway from a traditional vampire novel. But in characters themselves, I liked Mark a lot, and it made me think of I knew those people who were obsessed with the little like monster things and all that stuff growing up. I myself was not one of them, but I did know that, and it felt very true and genuine, very organic as a character.
Alicia, how about you?
I was going to say Mark too, but now I feel like I'm jumping on a bandwagon, so I was
You're
trying to think
fine.
of someone else.
Nah, it's fine. I agree. I think that's the case, and I think it's something. Again, as we progress through, like his, last time I saw him live, I went to see him live for The Outsider of the Institute when he wrote that, and he said, those are his favorite like good characters. So his favorite bad character is Annie Wilkes, which is the Kathy Bates character from Misery. So that's his favorite bad guy.
I forgot that he wrote Misery.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's crazy as we go through this. So, but he said all of his favorite good guy characters are usually the kids or the younger people, and you'll see that when we get into like the newer ones. Where Meg, you guys read The Outsider, right, in your book club?
Yep, I think that was Evan. Was that pre you?
That was pre Evan. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Evan joined us during the pandemic, but The Outsider was.
So Holly Gibney is one of his favorite characters, who is in like 3 or 4 books, and then she's obviously plays a big role in The Outsider as well. So
she's great. I loved her.
Yeah, she's a great character, and she's a great character throughout the like 4 or 5 books that she's in. So I think you'll like those too. So as we kind of progress through, it seems like everybody enjoyed this one much more than Carrie, except for poor Evan who didn't have to read Carrie.
I'm gonna go back to it at some point. I feel like I gotta fill in that little gap as we move forward. But I mean, Carrie, you go look at the movie. It's the iconic, prom scene, and again, even if it's not the greatest book, I'd like to see the leap, like you guys mentioned, between that piece of writing and this.
Alicia and I were not fans of that book.
No, it's a substantial leap. I mean, and then I think you'll see as we continue down, obviously the books get longer and longer, but his character he gets way deeper into character development and into like giving you a real basis for the world, which is why I hated growing up where it was the first Stephen King book I read. And I think the original miniseries came out in the late 80s when I was like 18 or 19. And I hated it. And I hated the new movies because the level of detail he goes into explain those characters and all, it doesn't work in a movie. Also, the ending is just horrific on all fronts.
I will say, speaking of the ending, when you mentioned before about him not knowing how to land a plane, that book had like 3 solid places it could have ended before he actually ended it.
He loves the circle of the airport. I mean, he's just he's like, I got extra fuel. I'll just keep this thing going.
It is one of the books that I bought before we started this Stephen King thing, and I started reading it. And I only got maybe like the first chapter in and then got distracted. But I can't believe you read that as a 13-year-old, because I got 1 chapter in and I cried as a 30-year-old woman.
It's crazy. Yeah.
It's one of Klaus's favorite movies, so maybe I'll read it with him. That's what a 7-year-old needs before bedtime.
Klaus is her 7-year-old son.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about it, and you think of again, I haven't read it, but I've heard the stories of the true child gore and horror and things that you could never depict in a movie, even if it is artwork. A book being artwork, movie being artwork, but Hollywood isn't going to touch that. That's the beauty of King, is that this is stuff that he would normally get canceled for, but in literature, you don't see many people getting canceled.
No, it's funny too. You'll see that as we move on. He has a few books where if that was a movie or a TV show, he would 100% be canceled. But it's not.
Outsider, they made into a movie, and that's all about, I mean, I don't want to ruin it for you, and I know we'll get to that, but just like terrible things happening to children. And when they made it into the TV show with
Jason Bateman.
Jason Bateman, that's what it is. I was so confused how they were going to show it, and watching it, they got very strategic about like how things were done. But oh my God, I could not believe that was on like national television.
They did. And speaking of like translations of his books into miniseries or movies, they actually did a pretty good job with The Outsider, because HBO did it, and I think they did a really good job.
I loved everything except for the ending where they like just like in the cave, they just like totally changed it. It was supposed to be like her name's Holly, right?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be like her big moment, and I felt like they kind of took it away from her a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
But anyway, we'll get to that.
She has big moments. In the future. She has big moments in a lot of books, so you'll get to know Holly very well. So it's funny, as we progress, I don't know anything about Rage. So Rage is a book that he wrote under a pseudonym. So there's a few books. I was thinking about kind of going through and making sure that we have everything in there, and I think we do, because he wrote a bunch of books as a Richard Bachman, which I think Rage is the first book he wrote as Richard Bachman because he didn't want people to know that it was him. And then he wrote a few with Peter Straub that are like a little more sci-fi-ish. But I believe those are all in our list to do. So this one should be a little bit of a departure, but I don't know anything about Rage, which is funny. It's one of the few books I haven't read. So it should be interesting.
That's exciting that it'll be like a Stephen King first for you. We haven't had that yet in the podcast. No.
Yeah, there's a few I haven't read, but that's one of them.
In Salem's Lot, what was the most gruesome part for you guys?
Gruesome or just awkward?
Either, whatever.
Because the kid being tied up and the amount of times they spend talking about this kid's testicles was like Caleb actually came in while I was listening to it, and he's like, "What are you listening to? What is going on?" I'm like, "This is really awkward."
The fact that you listen to that without headphones on is just so charming. Oh man.
I was in my office by myself. I didn't know he was coming in. But as far as like gruesome goes, I don't know, probably the description of, for some reason, the basement description when they're going in and they think they see the pile of clothes, that became so much more in my head that I was like, oh, it's a bloody mess. And like my imagination took off with that. So while it might not be strictly speaking the most gruesome, it's the one my brain was like,
yeah. I think he painted a picture of gruesome rather than actually have it happen. It's vampires. I mean, maybe again at the time I tried to put myself back in a time 3 years before I was born and say, okay, we're vampires. Was a vampire doing something to somebody gruesome? I think, I mean, to me, I guess his I guess he was the familiar, hanging upside down, like really just the blood just letting out. I found that like gruesome, but I mean, compared to some of the stuff that he's written and that other writers have written, I didn't find it particularly gruesome. I mean, vampires, it just doesn't seem gruesome to me. Just somebody and blood, whatever.
Yeah.
What about you, John?
I would agree. I think with Alicia, I agree. I think he does a really good job of getting you to a place that may or may not actually happen, where you're fearing it more than it is whatever actually happened. So I think he does a really good job with that. And I agree. I think it's really difficult to... This is one book in particular where I think it's hard to put into historical perspective because it is so much before all of the popular vampire. You got to remember, like, this is before Interview with a Vampire. Obviously, it's before the, like, kid vampire, like the Twilight series and everything. Like so True this Blood. Is like the only thing that was written before this is really, True Blood. It's way before True Blood. So this is like way before. The only thing before this was really Dracula, where Dracula really wasn't a good guy or a bad guy. Like you kind of felt both sides for Dracula. So yeah, I thought it was really interesting. So
yeah. I think you make a great point with that. It's like growing up, and seeing all of the newer vampire iterations, and even like something like Buffy comes to mind, and it's almost been satirized in a way, and made to be almost pop culture. So when you read it, I've never read Bram Stoker's Dracula, as I should. It was interesting to get that darker traditional sense of a vampire novel from this. Yeah,
I enjoyed that aspect of it, but it's difficult to kind of compare it now because there's so much poppy, fun vampires out in the world.
The one thing that struck me along those lines is like, you have this vampire who comes into a town, and then the town is now, for all intents and purposes, entirely ghouls and baby vampires. And it's like, how does an entity like that continue to exist? Like, it doesn't seem to completely, I don't have other words to describe this. It doesn't seem to make evolutionary sense how the vampire would have gotten there, but it makes the vampire more sinister. And I think that we actually, as we moved forward in time, rationalized vampires as opposed to them being predators who killed to kill.
Yeah. Well, they become like sexy, right? They become like more of like a species that you're enamored with, that we kind of fall in love with, and we willingly give ourselves over to them.
And that's the whole point of a vampire, right? It makes you do that.
Yeah.
Did you ever read Vampires in the Lemon Grove? Oh, that's great. I'll have to pass it along to you. It's a short story in a book of short stories, but it's about this like old Italian grandfather, and he is a vampire and he sucks lemons because it's the closest thing he can get to blood, to try not to drink blood. But it's a really interesting take on vampires, and for some reason that book kept coming to my mind as like the polar like opposite of what I'm reading, and pulling it back and forth. But I don't know.
Speaking of vampires, have you guys watched the AMC show that hold on, it's called A Discovery? Oh, it's not. It's A Discovery of Witches.
Oh, I watched Discovery of Witches.
Yeah, I just
that is a great show.
There's vampires in there. Yeah, it's really, really good.
That now.
It's a good one. It has nothing to do with this, but
was that a book? A Discovery of Witches? Yeah. I'm thinking
it's based off a book. I never read the book.
Okay.
Yep. So, all right, cool. That was a pretty good one. Hopefully next time we'll continue to grow. Evan, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you aboard.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to Rage. I don't read plot summaries, and I read the first sentence, and I'm like, I'm stopping right there, and I'm going this one.
I haven't read anything about it. I'm very excited.
I didn't know that was the next one up.
starting with the next one, I'm going to do as we come in here, I'm going to read the Stephen King intro to those, because I think it's really interesting because he speaks directly to the readers. It's not like a summary of the book. It's like how the fuck I got here. So I really like those intros. So I think we'll start with that as we move forward.
And then I think we were going to do the like rating system too, right?
Yeah. So I think it's safe to assume, obviously this is Evan's first. So I think it's safe. Oh my God, she's so cute. I think it's safe to assume that this is everybody's number one book so far. So
yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Even Mabel.
One sample size.
Yeah, Mabel just woke up.
Little Mabel's.
Lucky Mabel.
It was her third nap of the day, and it's 12:30.
So great.
Okay. Thank you for doing this, John.
Yeah, of course. Thank you guys so much. Everyone, if you want to check us out, we are at Byte Size Social on social media. And if you'd like to join us for the book club, go to bitesizedigital.com, and you can see up in the upper left-hand side, there's a little thing called Fun Stuff, and you could join. All the Zoom stuff is in there and ready to go. You can register for our next one. If anybody wants to read Once and Future, that's the next book we're going to be reading. We're doing that one on the 15th. It's a one-off of our series that we're doing. So
we're just on the schedule, Evan, that this book club is the day after our other book club every time. So just hyper speed with the book.
Yeah, we're ready.
I'm reading like a maniac. I might be able to make it. I might be able to fit it in.
It's good. Pandemic time. All right, everyone. Have a lovely weekend, and we will see you guys in 2 weeks. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Jeff.
Bye, guys.